Good evening and welcome to Politicit podcast. Tonight we have Cari Bartholomew. And Cari is a candidate for school board, for the state school board.
Right.
Which district is?
District 13.
District 13 of the state school board. Very good. So Cari, it's nice to have you back.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit, just so we can put this in context. Let's talk a little bit about you for a minute.
Sure.
Okay. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you and what your background is?
Sure. It's kind of insane to be running for school board because I'm not a politician by the furthest amount that you can imagine, right? So my background is I grew up in the foster system. I moved to Utah thinking that I could put my head in the sand and that I could send my son to school and everything would be fine. And I found that that wasn't the case. So after a couple of years of reaching out and trying to sound the alarm on certain things, I realized...
Where did you move from?
I moved from Seattle.
Okay.
I moved from Seattle in 2020 when everything was going insane.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that's specifically why you came to Utah, because you thought, I'm going to get away from this.
I thought I would be coming to the most pro-American, pro-value state. Yes, that's what I expected.
And that's not what you found.
It's not what I found, no.
So let's talk. What motivated you then to run for the school board? What are the hot button topics that have got you excited about this?
Well, first let me talk about what motivated me, and that was parents calling me. Parents texting me saying, it's got to be you. And the reason that they feel that it needs to be me is because I have courage. And we are living in a time when I think a lot of good people want to do the right thing, but they're so afraid of being called names. They're so afraid of stepping out of line and having like the Salt Lake Tribune, etc., just lambast them. And I'm not. It's not fun, but I'm not afraid of it because I had a young woman in the grocery store who I was talking to because I'm just kind of that person. I was talking to a young woman and she said to me, you know, all of these things they're trying to do to be more inclusive are dividing us in our schools. And she said, us kids know it. But my question is when is an adult going to stand up for us? And that was about 2 years ago. And that haunted me. And so when I didn't see anyone who I felt was quote unquote more qualified, I'm autodidactic. I'm self-taught. The things that I know, which I do have a lot of knowledge, but the things that I know because as a parent, I've researched it because I've been concerned about what's coming or what other people are telling me or what I'm seeing, especially in regards to social and emotional learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion /CRT /ethnic studies, the gender ideology, which is what I would call it, that's really going into our schools, and really just kind of the compliance has concerned me. So that's why
I know you were involved in helping with the movement to get DEI departments out of the universities.
Yes.
I know you and I were on a panel at the university. Why don't you tell people a little bit about what was going on there and what your motivation was?
Sure. Well, you asked me to come. I think that a lot of times what I'm watching a lot of times is that our young people are being taught to ignore logic and to only react with emotion. That should be concerning. So what I'm watching is these kids who cannot think in a balanced way. And so you asked me to come because I'm pretty good at speaking to people across the aisle or speaking to people in a compassionate and measured way. And so I came, and when I got there, I had a police escort, which was shocking to me. Here I am, just a mom and a substitute teacher, and I'm thinking, nothing. And I get into the room, and I'm told that there's going to be a protest. And the room is filled, I don't know, maybe 30 people, 30 teenagers 20-ish year olds who stood with signs that said, "Why do you hate diversity?" And it didn't make any sense to me because I literally was coming to say, my main point is that we cannot center around some at the exclusion of others. So one of the weird things about that room is that there were so many Caucasian males in it. And a lot of what I do, it's not that I prefer anybody, but I did see a lot with the DEI bill talking about how Caucasian males are kind of being pushed out. And so I just wanted to say, when you come to the table and you have a conversation, every single person should matter, not just the person who is a gender non-binary, not just the person who is a person of color. You matter because you have inherent worth. And they did not want to hear that. And they turned their backs and faced the walls when either you or I spoke, which was really sad. It's kind of scary that our kids are in a place where they cannot listen to other points of view.
Yeah, that's a scary part, right? Where they don't want to listen. It seems it's almost like they feel like it's an attack on them or something.
Words are violence.
Yeah.
That's the way that some of them look. You know, I teach in a homeschool co-op, and when I teach my teenagers, the first thing that I have plastered on the wall is, how can we be less wrong more often? So we never come into the room thinking that we have all the answers. And we literally just sit and talk. We talk about, like, what makes a person a good person? What do you think about the concept for the greater good? And so these kids can actually have conversations, listen respectfully to different points of views. And I think it's much healthier, because I believe that we need to be about solutions. We can't just complain, mock, belittle people who don't think the same way we do. We have to have a solution at the table.
You know, one of the things I found incredible of where we actually ended up with on the DEI bill was that it really basically says we have to have fairness for everybody.
Yes.
We need to invest in young people. We need to help people based on their situation, not who they are or what group they belong to. That that we want offices that helps kids with problems that they have. You know, certain groups, you know, have a higher propensity to come from, you know, poverty, right, or from first generation.
Right, first generation education. You know, that's one of those places where I honestly call the bill the baby step bill, because I feel like it could have went further. And there are things that maybe we should have done to go further. I worry about, we have affinity groups in some of our schools where you go to this group if you're Asian, this group if you're Black, this group if you're Hispanic. And I worry not that people are learning about their culture and learning to respect, you know, their history, but that they're learning to other students. They don't feel comfortable. So, like, one thing, and it can be a little bit controversial, Latinos in Action. I think it's an amazing program. It does really good work. But I wish it were Teens in Action, because I wish that we had that kind of amazing services, good works, and opportunities for all kids.
And that's really what this bill was about.
Right.
At the universities, right? Hey, we're going to take a break.
Sure.
And we'll come right back.
Perfect. Thanks. Regardless of the narrative, most of us don't care about your skin or your gender or your culture, except to find it interesting. Most of us care whether or not a person is a good human being. Teaching our children to hate each other in the name of social justice is still teaching our children to hate, and it's wrong. Our students deserve the legacy that was so hard fought for. They don't need to march in the streets with their fists up in the air, because it's already been done for them. What they do need is a culture that fosters dignity, a classroom that teaches every child that they're equal, and a basic moral principle that gratitude is always better than grievance. I'm Cari Bartholomew. I'm running for state school board in position 13, and I hope I can win your vote. Welcome back to Politicit. We've got Cari Bartholomew here, District 13, State School Board. Yeah, very good. So let's talk a little bit. I know you don't necessarily see
eye to eye with is that fair to say, with the education establishment,
Sure.
we call it?
Yes. Yeah.
So what are the things that you think that you're uniquely qualified for on the state school board, and why you would add to that mix?
Sure. I think the main and kind of that elephant in the room, if you want to say, is that the USBE is called to make a lot of decisions on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But really in Utah, they tend to just follow what I call the Utah squad. Just like in DC, there's a squad. In Utah, there's a group of minority people, and it's their narrative, and that's the only one that's allowed to be told. But in my experience, a lot of people, just your regular working class, which is where I come from, your working class people of every single color, they don't buy into the narrative. They don't want to be called Latinx. They don't want to be called BIPOC. To me, that sounds honestly like a bisexual chicken. But I just sit there going, why would you take over someone's culture? And that's what I'm realizing is happening in our schools. Little by little, on CASEL's website, they call it systemic implementation. But little by little, we're taking away the values and the traditions that we hold dear, whether or not that's telling people of color that they have to be part of the whole gender thing, because that's what queering is. Because see, queering, that's important, is not about stabilization. So that's what we think, that we're just being kind, we're just being empathetic to people. We just want them to have stable lives if they have an alternate lifestyle. But that's not the point of queering. In fact, if you were to look up right now on your phone, you would see that queering says to break or to ruin. So we want to ruin the minds of our children from the things that they've known in the past and get rid of kind of objective truth. And so what we're pushing for, what I'm seeing the push for, is activism for our kids. So I brought a few papers here, and they're from the UEA.
Okay, tell me about these positions and why you're opposed to them.
Sure. Okay, so the first one that I see that I find alarming is land acknowledgements. And if you spend any time looking at what's happened in South Africa, you'll know that it started with land acknowledgements. It started just with a simple little, we acknowledge that we are on stolen land. And then from we acknowledge that we're on stolen land, it becomes, now we want our land back. And then it becomes, now we want our land back or else. I'm very concerned about that. In some of our schools, we are pulling Native American kids out of history and giving them their own history class. And before I had an idea, maybe this is what's going on. But after seeing land acknowledgements on the UEA's page, after seeing that, I'm far more concerned. Racial justice. I don't believe much of what's happening today is justice. We're seeing a lot of things around the country that you go, how in the world, what is happening with our law system? And so I don't think, having again come from Seattle, having seen the riots and the looting and really the entitlement, I am very concerned that instead of letting racism die, which I think that most people would believe we came there, but it's complicated because there has been this racial issue, especially for people on the left, almost since the end of slavery. I was just finishing Booker T. Washington's book, and he was talking about how in Washington, D.C., the people would squander their money and had a reliance on the government right out of slavery, whereas this other side was being pragmatic and doing the work and learning. And so this one thing that really hits me between who said it better kind of back then or now, right, is that right after slavery, African Americans, a lot of people felt they shouldn't go to school because they were a working class, they were a laboring class, they couldn't achieve. They were too traumatized. This is where it hits today. They were too traumatized to be able to ever achieve excellence. And then Booker T. Washington came and he built the schools, and with the help of many people that we don't hear the stories of, like the Rosenwald schools. Now today, we are lowering the standards because we're saying that Black and brown people are too traumatized to be able to compete. And that's fundamentally where I disagree with this.
And that's that. You know, if you talk about equity,
yes,
if we really believe in that, which actually we believe more in a equality of
right.
opportunity, right? But if we wanted to move towards a more equitable situation, we would give everybody a good degree, right? We would teach them.
We would
challenge them.
Yes. I'm like, I don't want to give anyone anything. And what I loved the story about the Rosenwald schools is that Julius Rosenwald, who owned Sears, he would go out and he would say, I will give you seed money to start your school, but you have to build it. You have to staff it. You have to do bake sales and whatever else you can. And then these kids went from being slaves and not being able to even touch a book to reading Greek and Latin within 3 years. So it really comes down to the expectations that we have. Like, one of my platforms is, can we please restore American excellence? Our kids are being taught that America isn't that great. It's not that wonderful. Let's just, open the border, let anybody in. There's nothing to preserve here. And I don't agree with that. This is the one place that a kid like me, who grows up in the foster system, who's never adopted, this is the one place where you can go from being basically in the ghetto to having a better life just based on your merit, just based on the decisions that you make. And to tell our kids, especially to tell minority kids, that they can't do that. But the thing is we're not just telling minority kids that, because now we've moved it over to gender as well. So if you are part of that kind of oppressed group, you look for a reason to get out of it. And so we're telling all of these kids that you can't achieve. We're telling all these kids this narrative that there's too much capitalism in the world. You can't, just all the reasons they can't do something. And I think that when you tell somebody over and over and over that they can't do something, that eventually they start to believe it. And I think that that is what's happened, is that we've got multiple generations of people who believe a lie.
So what are some of these other positions?
Sure. So we had racial justice, ethnic minority affairs committee. This is one of those places where, from what I understand, because I have not dug into a lot of this, but what I understand is that because there's so many diverse people in the classroom, the teacher can't actually teach. They're putting headphones on the kids and just letting them go. That concerns me because of the UEA's position that they want ethnic studies as embedded into our programs as cinnamon is in cinnamon bread. Teaching truth in Utah. Well, you have to ask yourself, what is their version of truth? Because, as you know, I have a history book, or I have an ethnic studies book, hot off the presses. And in this book, the only voices of truth that they highlight are voices of socialists all the way through. And this is what your kid has to listen to, has to read. It's for 11th and 12th graders. This is what they have to look at as truth. There is no differing view. When they talk about Booker T. Washington, they call him an accommodationist, and they move on. So I'm very concerned about the weaponizing of words. We hear truth, we hear resilience, and what we think of as resilience is, let's teach these kids hard things. Let's teach them to be able to have hard things put on them and be able to get through it. But what they mean by resilience is to have kids who are okay with losing, to have kids who are okay with letting go of all of their values, still being kind of a shell of themselves, and basically being okay with being a global citizen. And that's the end goal here.
So what are some of the other ones that you
of my hot button issues? Yeah, it's SEL. And I really encourage people to take a look at Castle, dig deeply. Ethnic studies, because it's not teaching about cultures, it's teaching about a revolution, and it's teaching your child to embrace the revolution. DEI, because diversity is never diversity of thought. Equity means equal outcomes for those of us on the lower levels. And inclusion is only inclusion if you march in lockstep. So
you have
those are
to
the biggest issues.
you have to adopt a certain philosophy to
Right. And then also my last thing I think is because I work in schools, I see a lot of this pitting parents against teachers. And I would like to see that improved. There used to be where you had respect on both sides. And I think that part of that is when we're seeing districts saying, shh, let's be quiet, let's keep these things, that takes away from the parents' trust. And I would like to see, one, parents be more active in their children's education, but also just the respect restored.
Very good. So we're out of time.
Sure.
Why don't you make a pitch?
Sure.
Why would someone vote for you for the state school board?
Sure. I'm Cari Bartholomew. I'm running for position 13, and I'm running to stand for parents, teachers, and especially students who think that maybe we've taken a wrong turn in education and would like to get back to something that restores hope and joy in the classroom.
Thank you very much.
Thank
very
you.
Good. Cari Bartholomew. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks.